Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the College Board Going Digital, part two. This is actually the second time we're doing part two. We're calling it the redo, the Q&A session. So we are really excited to have you here just a couple weeks out from when many of you are going to begin the digital testing process for this fall session with the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT NMS QT. So we are thrilled to have you all here this morning. We had over 1,000 registrants for this session, certainly our largest webinar to date. We thought the 670 last time was pretty good, but you all keep overachieving. So we appreciate having you here. In a second, I'm going to put some ground rules up on the screen, and we'll talk through some of that. But as we're getting going, please take a second to say hi in the chat, who you are, where you're from, what your role is. We are thrilled to have a panel of incredible experts with us. We have Amy West, who is a testing coordinator at Allen Park. And then, of course, as always, we have Ted Gardella and Carrie Anima from the College Board, who are our resident experts. Before we get going, and as people are walking on, I want to take the moment, because we have a lot of counselors on here and a lot of ed leaders, administrators, teachers, to just share a couple of quick links to some really exciting opportunities with MASSP. Next week on Friday, we have our all virtual version of the Student Mental Health Summit. I know it seems like a crazy juxtaposition to talk about mental health while also talk about standardized testing, but go with me on this one. It's an incredible, and this year, all student-led process about thinking as a team to go to that. So if you scan that QR code with your phone, we'll also send it out with the notes afterwards. An incredible opportunity to not even leave your building and take a team and talk about these important things. The other I want to draw your attention to is a new conference we're running this year, which is Catalyst 23. As we talk about digital SATs and digital everything, this workshop is designed to help leaders and teachers at all levels, K through 12, think around the idea of how AI is transforming the work that we do. An incredible first part of the day with an interactive workshop, and then incredible breakout sessions afterwards. Again, those QR codes on your screen in the link that we'll send out afterwards are a great opportunity. This is a wonderful one. It's going to be at Macomb Community College's South Campus on October 17th. With that being said, the third one I want to talk about are the last two sessions of this series. We have the College Board Going Digital parts 4 and 5. Part 4 will be all about practice. We're going to have our friend Jason Feig from Khan Academy with us, as well as our friends from the College Board, talking about what you can do now that you've done this once to practice and make sure your students are ready for those accountability sessions that are going to occur in the spring and April, because that's going to be a really important piece for those of you who are only doing your 8th and 11th graders this year and want to figure out how to work with the rest. And then finally, the last one, session 5, which is in December, which is going to be about using the results. We're going to have a wonderful team of not only the College Board, but panelists from the Macomb ISD who are on the state SAT task force, talking about how we can use the data that's coming out of this to help supercharge our learning in our schools and actually make this productive time, not just testing time. So a lot of really good stuff. Those QR codes on the left and right on the bottom of your screens, go to those registration. These webinars are completely free for anyone who wants to attend them. Let's talk a little bit about how today's going to go. Thank you, everybody, for putting your names in. Saw lots of familiar faces and names in there and a lot of new ones. We have about 600 people on this webinar right now. So if we all go into the chat and start asking questions, I promise you we're not going to see them. It's just that simple. I don't want to say we're not going to see them, but we're not. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to answer your questions. So one of the things I just did was launch a poll that you should see hopefully pop up for you. That poll on there has only 2 questions with all the same answers. And what we're asking you to do is to take that poll and rank the top 2 items that you are like, these are the non-negotiables. And I know there's like 50 things right now that you want to know about, but this is going to help us to understand which areas to focus on as we get through the beginning. So Carrie and Ted are going to do about 20 minutes or so of PowerPoint slide deck, where they're going to talk through, review some of the things that we've already done with the day 2, from registration to the use of the Test Day Toolkit. And after that, we're going to use questions in the Q&A to guide where we're going to go. Now, I've changed that for this session, allowing the Q&A to be open and visible. So we're not screening those questions. I'll look for them. So if you ask, hey, Tom, like, what's your favorite flowers? Because I really like you, I'll probably eliminate that one because it's not necessary for this. They're tulips, by the way, because it's my wife's favorite flowers, right? We need to know that information. But as questions come into the chat, What we would like to do is have you vote those up or down. Read them first before you just start slinging questions in the Q&A, because if there are 15, or as we have now 610 people on here, 500 of the same question, it's not going to be efficient for you or for us. So with a webinar of this size, we wanted to make sure that we had some order and organization to it first. So I see a lot of people already in the polls. Setup and access to the Test Day Toolkit is rocking it out at 22% right now, and we'll keep looking at that. There's also some questions in the Q&A already, and there are people voting them up, which is awesome because it tells us what we have to answer. So you guys are rock stars, already doing it the right way. And with that, and without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to let Carrie take over and allow our friends from the College Board to start their part of the presentation. But again, thank you all for being here this morning. We're really excited about this work and what we're doing together. Carrie, Ted, the show is yours.
Well, I'm going to try and focus on quite a few of we've already got a couple in the Q&A, and then Tom wants the polls go live. So I'm going to let Carrie really start us out. And then I'll jump in a little bit. And as Tom said, we want to try and get through this so that we can answer as many questions as possible. Carrie?
Carrie, you're still muted. That old unmute trick, it'll get us every time.
Oh my goodness, you would think I would learn by now. This is my 4th webinar. All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Excited to see all of you here. Saw tons of familiar names in the chat, and really hope you've got your caffeine with you this morning, because we promise to make this journey informative and enjoyable. We've got 1,000 witnesses, so if I mess up, I've got a lot of explaining to do. So fasten your seatbelts. We're going to try to go through lots of information. We've covered a lot in session 2, so you can always go back and watch that. But there's been a lot of questions and answers, so I've tried to really hone in on what at least Ted and I are hearing from all of you out in the field. So I'm going to start with quick review over ordering. And the reason I chose to do a quick review over the ordering is I've had quite a few questions about the validation process. And validation, there's a role that needs to be assigned for that. So let's review what the roles are. There's an SAT Suite manager, there's an ordering person, and then there's that SAT Suite data coordinator role. Whoever is assigned that SAT Suite data coordinator role is the person that can validate for your school and upload for your school. So if you're ordering tests from a district level, you need to assign someone at the building level that SAT data coordinator role. If you're ordering from the building level, you need to assign someone from your building that SAT data coordinator role. Just a reminder how to do that. You go into your College Board account. If you're the SAT order or manager, you will select that and you will choose who you're going to assign. So I put a couple examples down there from some of my schools that I love working with. In Portage Central, they've got several people. They've got 2 different people as that data coordinator, and they've got several different people as the registration people. If I look at Ida High School, Sarah does everything. So she assigned herself that role. And then if I go over to Rockford, the principal has the ability to look on things, but Ricky's handling most of the data upload there. So multiple ways multiple people can have that role. Just don't forget to assign that data coordinator role. So hopefully that's answering some of your questions right now. Who uploads data and who manages data? Remember, if you go into your College Board account, there's where you can assign those roles to people. So if you are one of the people that says, okay, I've uploaded all the data, but my person at the building can't validate it, go into your College Board account, assign roles, and that's where you can assign someone that data role. Also make sure that you confirm those contacts in there. So those are 2 things that need to be completed, and hopefully that will be helpful for you as you're making your updated files and your validated files. So just a checklist, action items for those test coordinators. Once you become the access manager from your school, you need to assign yourself and others different roles, place your order, which I believe most of you on this call have done already, and then update the contacts in there. And then you'll be able to upload that data registration file and validate that registration file.
Carrie, just be cognizant, we do have a lot of acronyms in there. So the STC is the school test coordinator. So I just want to make sure everyone understands what those roles are.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry for all of those acronyms, everyone. I did put a QR code right there, and I'll leave this screen up for a minute. And Ted is going to talk about registration and validation. But that QR code is a great place to go if you have questions when you think about registering students and validating those students. So Ted, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, just trying to answer a couple questions in Q&A. So hopefully we can keep doing some of those live so that we don't have to answer them after the program. So so as Carrie said, registration it's still open, and registration is required for students to test. So once you've placed the order and you've uploaded your file, you're not yet quite ready to test. You have to do the validation registration step, and that should be a collaboration between the test coordinator and the SSD coordinator, because the registration data is there and the accommodations are, if the accommodations are in our SSD system, they are loaded into the registration that you'll see. So let's go to the next slide, Carrie. So it is a two-step process. As Carrie mentioned, you need to have a data coordinator to upload the data file. So that person has to be identified in the manage access process that Carrie covered earlier. So once that data coordinator is identified, they will upload the registration file, and the registration file specifications are available. We've talked about that before. Carrie, you may want to put that link to the registration file specs in either the chat or in the Q&A. But you can find the registration file specifications, and once you do the upload, the system itself will check your file, and it will tell you whether there are any errors that need to be corrected. So once you have a correct data file uploaded, then you move into this, what we call the registration role. So this is where the school testing coordinator and the SSD coordinator have to work together. You validate and register students. At this stage, you can still add, delete, or edit individual records. And you can make those changes, but just a point of clarification, that system requires 2 business days for any changes to be processed. So if you're 2 days away from your test date and you're making changes, just know that those changes are not going to appear in Test Day Toolkit until you have waited at that time. We are very, very hopeful that it will be less than 2 business days, but that's what we're saying is, just make sure that you're in your planning, you're planning for that. So your registration hub is going to still be in the SAT Suite ordering and registration site. So from your SSOR dashboard, that's the SAT Suite ordering and registration dashboard, you'll see the register students link if you've been assigned the data coordinator or the registration roles. That link is going to take you to the registration hub. You'll be able to see which assessments were ordered. If you're the data coordinator, you're going to click on and upload the data file. And if that's been done and it's all correct, then you're going to confirm student registrations. Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, and I'll just point out, Ted, I've got a lot of emails that register students is grayed out. And the reason that would be grayed out is because you weren't assigned the access to do that. So that's just an important link to see what that's circled in red up at the top.
So if that happens, then as Carrie said, if you don't have the access, then somebody needs to go into the manage access tool and provide you with the test coordinator role so that you can do that. So this is the registration file upload. Each column of the data file has to have the required information for each test taker. So none of those The fields can be blank. The data file has to contain 13 columns, 13 columns, and they have to be in the correct order. Some data is optional and can be left blank, but the column still needs to be in the file. And the attending code field has to be completed for any away students. Now, what are away students? Away students might be homeschool students who are going to be taking the test at your school, or they might be students from another school that are taking your test at your school. So make sure that that's completed for any away students. It has to be a CSV format, and you cannot have any special characters in the file name. And then, as we've said, you can click on the link on that PowerPoint slide here, and you can go to the registration file template and the data requirements for each column. So you'll get an alert once you submit your file, letting you know it's in progress, and the yellow button in step 1 will go away. And then once that file has been processed, you'll be able to see a new alert letting you know it's been uploaded and what steps are remaining. So you would click the Continue Data Upload button. So you've already submitted your file, and now the system has processed it, and there's more information available to you. So now you've got to go to that Continue. So 2 different checks. One is the file format. And I know that we haven't been getting very many questions about the file format check, so it looks like people are doing a great job uploading the file format. But then there will be data errors and warnings that must be completed. And you can use the report that you get here. That's what's circled in red. You'll get the errors report, and it will tell you how to fix your data. And then after you address the errors, then you have to upload a new file in order to fix. You cannot upload a Delta file. You have to upload a new file to fix those errors and warnings.
And I'll just add on, Ted, sometimes you might get a warning, such as what if you have 2 students named Ted Gardella? That might be legit, and you actually do have 2 students. You can submit with warnings. Those are just things to just check over.
That would be horrible if there were 2 students named Ted Gardella. So let's say that everything's gone well, your upload has gone well, you fixed any errors, uploaded a replacement file, everything's cool. You're going to get a data sample. It will include 10 records. And this will be your final opportunity to review your data. So you look at the data, confirm things like first and last names are not swapped. The data for each student belongs to that student and hasn't shifted. The IDs that are provided are correct and belong to the correct organization. So this is where we're kind of moving along this process, and we're showing hopefully the happy path, as we call it, towards the next step. So here's the step where the SSD coordinator and the test coordinator have to collaborate. So the data is uploaded. Now the school has to review and confirm that the registration is accurate and make any updates. So here's where you can add students. You can edit students at this point in time. So you have to have the registration role in SSOR, and you'll select the Register Students button. So you'll go into this registration hub, and you'll see the tests that have data ready for them, and then you'll see the student data presented. It'll be a student roster. And what you will do, if you want to check on an individual student, you'll click on their name. And so if you click on the name, then up will come all of the information, including accommodations. But let's say you're seeing everything is, oh, I'm sorry, you did put that in. Let's say you're seeing everything is going well, then you're just going to click the checkbox. You can click the checkbox up top, which will be all of those students, and then go in and individually click those students who won't be taking the test. But I think best practice is to go student by student and check and make sure that they have the right accommodations. So you'll have that ability to edit or delete. As you can see, Carrie's got a screenshot of where you can add students, delete students, or request a full data replacement. You can do that. You can register 1 student at a time, select multiple students, or select all students. Once they're registered, that is going to be the key to loading those students into Test Day Toolkit. right? So if the data is incorrect after a student is registered, then you'll have to go in and delete that student. So you would have, let's say that you just were clicking too fast and you added in one student and then you realize, oh, that data is not correct. That accommodation is not correct. You'll have to go in and delete that student and then add in a new student with the correct information. So you should be collaborating with your SSD coordinator. All students that have accommodations should be reviewed by the SSD coordinator. Remember that that information had to have been in the SSD system. You know, we recommended, we gave you a deadline of 7 weeks before your testing window opens, because some student data has to take 7 weeks to get an approval. But all of that information should be in the SSD system, and then that should populate once you've uploaded the data file into the SSOR roster. So again, as you're reviewing the student information, the school information, if there are any errors, you would edit and then save changes. Remember that we're talking about a 2-day window, so you need to do this 2 days before, at least 2 days before the testing is to begin, and actually a lot longer before that. So here are the timelines for the registration and the digital readiness check. These are best practice timelines. And so what we've been saying is if you were going to test starting the very first week, which is October 2nd, then really your work should be done. You should already have validated registration, and you should actually be completing your digital readiness check. If you chose the second week, you've got a bit more time there on that. If you chose the third or fourth week, you have even more time. And again, you can move back and forth between the information that's in the registration file. You can add, delete it, but it takes 2 business days, up to 2 business days, for that change to be recorded. Again, I do want to just, I'm watching the chat a little bit here. Please make sure that your questions go into Q&A, not in chat, because we're really going to be monitoring the Q&A, and then whatever we can't answer, we'll come back to. So what are the important takeaways here? Your data files have to be accurate before you upload them in the SAT Suite ordering and registration system. You have to have the correct roles assigned in order to complete the validation and registration process. So Carrie talked about there's actually three platforms in play here. There's the Manage Access platform where you assign roles. There's the SAT Suite ordering and registration system where you're doing your upload and your validation and registration. And then there's Test Day Toolkit, which is where you're going to be setting up rooms and or proctors. So there is the flexibility to add or delete or edit orders, but those changes will take up to 2 business days to process through the system. And yep. And then there are some QR codes here. If you go to the In-School Educator Experience website, there'll be lots more information there. And I believe that Carrie is going to be talking about much more about the training as well.
Sure, Ted. I'm going to leave these up for just a minute if anyone wants those QR codes. If you have questions about the file specifications, that's the one on the left. If you have questions about the actual registration and uploading, that's the middle one. And then there is a module on the right for SAT Suite ordering and registration if you're at that step, or you still have questions on how to add in access to the correct people. We will be sharing this slideshow with Tom, and who will be sending it out, so it will have all of these links, and I believe he's putting those in the chat as well.
And I'm noticing a few questions about having file upload issues and getting rejected. I did run into that issue. I'm registering about 300 students for our school. And this sounds strange, but I kept getting a message saying that there were files running in the background or that there was things attached to the Excel sheet. So what I did is I uploaded it to a Google Sheet, then downloaded it again as an Excel sheet, then uploaded it again to SSOR, and it worked. So whatever was running in the background of the sheet went away when I did that bounce. I know it sounds ridiculous, but when I did that bouncing back and forth, it eliminated whatever my IT department had running in the background of our Excel sheet.
Great feedback, Amy. Thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and move on to Test Day Toolkit as the next part of our session today. Once you have uploaded your registration file, your Test Day coordinator will receive an email with access to Test Day Toolkit. It's not a link, it's an email, and it will ask you for a cell phone number to verify that, and then that will get you into Test Day Toolkit. So Test Day Toolkit, again, is the adult side of things. Blue Book is the student side of things. So Test Day Toolkit is going to play a large role in your assessments. It's your dashboard for monitoring student testing. It gets you student test tickets, everything that you will need for testing day. So you'll receive that email. The coordinator, whoever is assigned the role as Test Day coordinator, will get that email. And then as soon as you get that, staff can access those emails as soon as their coordinator adds them to the Test Day Toolkit staff list. So you'll need to click the personalized link in your Access email and enter the code that is sent to you. I did put a website at the bottom, testday.collegeboard.org, if you are having any trouble with Test Day Toolkit. But remember, you have to have that registration file in place first and your order placed before you can do that. So once you get into Test Day Toolkit, these are the steps that you're going to be doing pre-test day. You'll log in and activate the account. Then you can select your school and your event. You might have access to multiple schools. So you'll have 2 different schools and 2 different events and possibly 3 different events. This is where you'll add the rooms. You'll assign students to those rooms. You'll add staff to those rooms and the different roles. Are they a proctor? Are they a monitor? And this is where you'll print the test tickets. Most of these pages have links, so a helpful resource that's linkable at the bottom is Setup Test Day Toolkit that will walk you through that. So the first thing you'll get is that login and activate your account. You'll go ahead and press continue. You do need to have a College Board professional account first. And just a reminder, all of your proctors and hallway monitors and room monitors and your technology coordinator for the building will need College Board professional accounts. So once you get that, you'll click on the personalized access. You'll sign into your College Board account, choose a way for the College Board to send you a code, whether it's texting you, emailing you, or calling you. You'll verify your identity. And then once that happens, you'll begin to receive those emails with the trainings. This is what the coordinator homepage looks like in Test Day Toolkit. You can see you have different buttons. You have the testing rooms, you have the rosters, you have a regularity button, your Test Day staff, and then the tickets button. So the next few slides are what Test Day Toolkit looks like for the test administrator, for whoever is your test manager, Test Day manager. If you would like, I've had a number of people email me. I have these broken up into shorter chunks. So if you just need slides on Test Day Toolkit, you can certainly copy them from this slide deck, or you can email me and I'm happy to send you just a short deck of what the Test Day Toolkit looks like and what Blue Book slides look like too. So the next few slides are just showing you what each one is going to look like. So if you're reusing rooms within the testing window, you can use a certain naming convention, just add the month and the day after the room name, and then if necessary, add the time too. So once you name rooms, you can use this again in the spring. Just put a date after it. This is where you'll add Test Day staff, and you'll see that you need their email and you need their cell phone number. So something to be thinking about right now is figuring out who are your room monitors, who are your proctors, who are your hallway monitors, and you'll need their name, their email address, and their cell phone number to put that in Test Day Toolkit so you have that information. You could add staff and assign roles to rooms, and you can always go back and change this too. But these are the fields that you're going to need when you add staff. You can see the right-hand side shows first name, last name, email, and mobile phone. This is what it looks like to view the student roster, and it's going to have the student's name, the testing group that they're in, and any accommodations that they might have. So this you can do in tandem with your SSD coordinator to make sure that the accommodation is correct, the timing is correct, and that will help you figure out room details. So you can put students with the same accommodations in the same room if desired. And this is where you can add non-standard, standard time students into rooms as well, if you choose to do that. This is what the page looks like to print student test tickets. You can sort them by room or sort them alphabetically. There's where you can print them. Remember, you'll need these test tickets to run your readiness test, and then you'll need test tickets on the day of testing as well. This is also where you'll report any irregularities. You won't need to fill that out on paper anymore. Yay! You will do all of this online, and most of it will be done through just making selections about what happened. There is an option to type in, but most things will be given an option so you can report any irregularities that happen during test day.
Carrie, I'm sorry to interrupt you. One of the questions that's asked and it's come up a couple times now is the idea of the cell phone number being required. There's a lot of concern and consternation about that fact that people won't want to give their personal cell phone for this process. Is there a workaround to that, or is that required for this? Because that was one that was new to me, so I hadn't heard that until you said it. So worth asking.
Ted, are you aware if we could just put a school phone number in there for that?
I'm not aware of that workaround, so that would be a question we'd need to ask. So I'm going to go ahead and ping that question and see if we can get an answer to it.
Okay.
On the other webinar done by the College Board people, I think it was last week, Tuesday or the week before, they said that using a work phone number is possible, but it's going to be really, really hard to do since they send a code and link to be able to go back to. And so while I totally understand the need not to share cell phone numbers and how uncomfortable it is harder to do the validation with using a work phone.
Great point, Amy. So that's the major reason for it, is to get that link. But we can certainly check to see if there is any other solution that someone has come to that. So thank you for the question.
So Carrie, I'm pinging Trisha. What is the link that we are asking for?
So when you go in and add roles, you need to add their cell phone number. If you look on this slide, right there, it asks for a mobile number for any staff that are going to be proctoring or monitoring. Your proctors, remember, are going to need access to Test Day Toolkit. So that's the link that they'll get, and they'll need to verify that. However, they can do that with an email. So let's look into that and see if that's possible.
So really quickly, Carrie, while you're doing that, somebody did put in the registration that in the last webinar, or in the chat, that the last webinar they were told that they could put in, or if they said no number, it could be emailed. So this will have to be one that we'll clarify before we send out a response. That way it's in kind of an FAQ. The second question, that this one's gotten the most pings on our, or the most likes in the Q&A, is around this. So we have all these people that need to be trained in this. Can we do a whole staff training? Or is this something that they have to go and, like, I can share the link to the test administration training through the College Board? What's the process to that? Is it a both and? Is it either or? What can you talk through that? Because that's before we even get to the test day, they have to be able to train their staff and know where that is.
That's a great question, and I think every district is going to do that a little bit differently. There are a number of districts that have shared with me that they do bring everyone together and they watch the video together at the same time. Or if you're maybe a larger district where you're not able to bring everyone together in the same room, you can push those links out. Does that make sense? Does that answer that question?
I don't know. I didn't ask it, but I think it does. So what you're saying is, so the College Board, the professional training.collegeboard.org site has videos that individuals should watch. But if I wanted to run that training as a whole staff, I could bring my staff into, say, my large presentation room or something like that, and we could watch those together and go through the process together. Or but we're saying they should watch that. They should use those videos. They shouldn't create their own PowerPoint in process. And Amy, you might have some say on this too, as you've had to train a staff on this. Like, what was that process?
When we did the pilot, we did a couple different things. One, I sent out the training videos through their College Board account, or I gave them a link to their College Board account training videos. I told them where to find it, and they did those. We also met as a large group, and as a coordinator, after you've got your room set up and you've got students in your room, you can open up a room by like clicking on room 15, and you can click on it and it opens the testing room. It does not start the test, it just opens the room. And then what we did, I had everyone sitting around on their computers, making sure they were logged in. We clicked through some of those pages so they could see some of the script they had to read. It didn't start anything. It didn't compromise any of the tests. There was no questions, no timers started, nothing of the sort, but they could preview and go through those screens to kind of read what the script says and what the steps would be. And so they can see like what it's going to look like when they have to check students in, and they can get to a certain point, but being able to see it in advance and all of us sitting around asking questions about it really took the pressure off of what it was for the proctors. Now, I know that means asking teachers to meet on their own time and those kinds of things. I was able to sneak it into a staff meeting for about 5 minutes, and then anyone who was having issues could come ask at that point. So we were able to do that with the pilot, and it really demystified a lot of what to expect on those screens, because we're so used to holding the book and knowing what the book is going to say. But clicking through as many screens as you could in advance, that means granting them access to it earlier than what the College Board recommends. So I apologize, Carrie and Ted, I don't mean to talk out of turn, but it did help.
That's great feedback, Amy. Really great feedback. It kind of leads into our next step. So this is Test Day Toolkit from the proctor side. So I'm showing you slides of exactly what the proctors are going to see when they get into Test Day Toolkit. So that might be helpful for you to share these with them in advance, because they're not going to be able to get into Test Day Toolkit this early unless you're testing in the next week or so. But they will log in, select their school, confirm their room. This is where they take attendance, they read the script. This is where they start the test and where they monitor student progress. And if needed, fill out any irregularity forms. So these are just some screenshots of what a proctor will see when they go into Test Day Toolkit. So they'll see a welcome page. They'll see that their students are assigned, how many they have assigned. The first thing that they'll need to do is count seats, confirm that they had enough seats. They'll take attendance, they check the spacing. The requirements on spacing are the same as they were with paper pencil. I did put a link into that in the slideshow a little bit later with room requirements, but they'll need to go through, check spacing, verify that that's correct. They'll need to distribute scratch paper, 3 sheets of scratch paper on each desk. And then this is where they'll distribute the test tickets to students. They'll write instructions on the board and the room code on the board. So you will need to have a room that has something that they can write on. If you're testing students that don't go to your school, you might have to add the Wi-Fi password if needed. They'll take attendance, and you'll see the students listed, and they'll take attendance for each student. And then this is the actual script that they'll be reading. So just like Amy was talking about, this is the script that they'll see, and an example of a room code that they will put on the board for students. So those are some screenshots of what they're going to see ahead of time. What they'll see is all of the students in their classroom listed, if they have accommodations, and their testing status, if they're in progress or if they've submitted and completed their test. And then they'll say on the left-hand side, who's not started, who's in section 1, who's in section 2, if anyone needs attention. And then the last thing that they'll do is collect scrap paper, click back to check each student's testing status on the dashboard, and then dismiss students with that submitted status. Again, this is also where they will report any problems. If they do this on the irregular report, it will go to the test coordinator, who then uploads the irregularity, which goes to College Board. So I'll pause right there for a minute to see if Tim or anyone wants to jump in. Tom?
A lot of these questions revolve around kind of training and manual and what people are doing. And one of the big questions that's been voted up in the Q&A is there a manual for this? Now, my understanding is that now the manual essentially is the Test Day Toolkit, as far as what the proctors will see and do. So maybe the question is there any preview of those steps other than what you just did? And obviously this will be included in the follow-up to that. Or is it essentially when we're a week out and they get access to the TDTK a week out from their work, that's when proctors are going to be able to see it, go through it. The corollary question of that kind of popped up in the chat during our last was it's tracking whether the coordinators, the testing coordinators, are actually watching the video and doing the training. Is it going to do the same thing for general staff, which would mean we would have to have them each independently do that, or is that just for coordinators? So 2 questions, is there a manual or is it just the TDTK? And the second is, does everybody have to do that training because the College Board is tracking and it might invalidate something if they do not?
So there are guides this year. So I'm going to provide a web page with guides so no manual like we've had in the past, but there are guides. You will see in the training modules these as well. So 2 different options. You can use the training to go through this. You can use this slide deck that we're sharing with you today to pull these out as well. I'll give you a hint. I went through the training myself, copied it, and put it in this slideshow. So that's where I found these actual links, slides of what things look like. So there's where you'll see in the training manuals how they look, and then there are guides. The guides are not as detailed as you might be used to with the manuals like last year, though. And we'll send the test day coordinator needs to do all of the training modules, and then the proctors just have a proctor module. The hallway monitors just have a hallway module, and we are going to get to that, and I will send some links, or I do have links in here in just a minute with a little bit more about training. Sound okay?
Yep.
I'm going to push forward to digital readiness check, and we will circle back to training in just a few minutes, though. So for the digital readiness check, once you have, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, we are getting a lot of questions in Q&A about, is this going to be the process for spring? And as we've said all along, this is the process for fall testing. The process for spring testing will be different, and you should be watching MDE Spotlight for news about webinars on the spring processes. We did not want to do anything during, and up to the testing window for fall on spring testing because we didn't want to have a lot of confusion. The processes will be different. We will be doing the pre-ID process in the secure site. And so it will be very different from this. That's why we wanted to make sure that we did all of the fall testing workshops. And then after the fall testing window is when we will start doing spring testing workshops.
Great, Ted. Okay, so digital readiness check. At the bottom of this page, there is a link to digital readiness check. So what the digital readiness check is, when you've got everyone uploaded, you've got everything validated, you have access to Test Day Toolkit, a day or two, maybe even a week prior to testing, you'll run your students through kind of a practice. So you're going to make sure that Students have devices, they'll have a test ticket, they can log in. You're just making sure that they're ready to go before the actual test day. So if your students are used to having their own personal Chromebook at school, that's best practice to just have them test on the same device that they use on a regular basis. It's also best practice if you use the same room. So they're going to be practicing going to that room that they're going to go to on test day. So just making that as simultaneous as you can make it as it's going to happen on test day. So as part of the digital readiness check, you can have your students complete just a test preview or a full-length test. If they do the test preview, it's just a short set of questions the students can go through to get a sense of how things work in Blue Book. They don't get any score, any feedback on their answers. You also have the choice of doing a full-length practice test, and if you choose to do that, that will take a couple of hours. So those tests are actually scored, and the full-length practice tests are timed, just like the real test, except that students can pause them. So that won't be indicative of the way they do things on testing. But after they complete that practice test, they can use their sign-in ticket to access mypractice.collegeboard.org, and that's where they can see their scores. So it's 2 ways you can do that digital readiness check with your students. During that digital readiness check, you'll distribute devices, sign-in tickets. The students will sign into Blue Book and they'll test their device. So another thing to just do ahead of testing to make sure everything is good to go for the actual day. So step 4 of the digital readiness check is after students sign into Blue Book, they'll complete that exam setup, and they need to complete that exam setup before they can test. So they'll confirm their name. If they have accommodations, they'll read and agree to the testing rules. They have the option to share their phone number so they can get their scores delivered through the mobile app through Big Future. If they provide their number, they'll be texted with the link to download the app. This is not available to students 13 or younger. If they're taking the NMSQT, students are going to answer a few questions to determine their eligibility for National Merit Scholarship. And I've listed the question there, what they'll be asked. And then if applicable, they can opt into connections. Step 5 is they'll complete the exam setup and take a test preview. They're not timed, so just make sure you allow enough time for students to try out all of the testing tools. And if they're using that assistive technology, they can use it here too. They don't get any feedback on their answers if you're just doing the preview. And once they have their tested device requirements, they've completed that exam and explore the test, then your readiness check is complete. So just some additional important reminders before we get to Q&A. Here's timing. Module 1 for reading and writing, they're both 32 minutes. And then there's a 10-minute break. And then the modules for math are both 35 minutes. That's for standard students. And then there's the timing if you have 1.5 or if you have double time accommodations. Here are the testing room requirements, very similar to what you had last year. I've put a link in there as well. How far apart the desks need to be, chairs have backs facing the same direction, very similar to last year. So the link to that is in there. Additional important reminders that there are scheduled 10-minute breaks between test sections, and Blue Book keeps the student tests timed. So breaks might happen a little bit differently. They might be a little more scattered than we're used to seeing. Amy, you might want to chime in on that. But remember, a question I get asked quite a bit, students cannot stop in the middle of the test for lunch and then resume testing.
Breaks are a little awkward. I can't lie about that. And it's a matter of setting up the climate of the room and setting up expectations with the students. Every student will enter their code and they could be 30 seconds off from each other, which then makes their breaks off from each other by 30 seconds. And yes, students are going to probably be up and walking out of the room to take their break, and they're going to be a distraction to one another just visually. So we've during the pilot, we had different rooms set up. We had one room set up with 120 students. We had one room set up with 50, one with 40, and one with 30. And then we had our accommodated rooms because we wanted to see what the difference in the arrangements would be. And most definitely the large room in the gym, that was a big distraction because it just was. Our students weren't conditioned, if you want to use that word, to be able to handle the distraction. So, but we did find with the room of 30 and with the room of 40 that they really didn't bother each other much being able to get up and move away and take breaks because they remained quiet and they treated it like any other classroom test. And so we've encouraged our teachers this year, as we're moving into testing, that when they give a test, students stay in their seats and don't turn the test in until everyone is done. There's no walking out and using the bathroom unless it's an emergency kind of situation during testing, that they've got to sit there and remain quiet. So we're getting them used to those conditions so that when we move into testing, they'll apply the same there. And I know they can hit that unscheduled break. We are just minimizing the knowledge of that button. And so if it is used, it will show up on your proctoring screen that they are taking an unscheduled break. And so you can monitor it and then you can make decisions, letting one out at a time and monitoring how long they're out. We're making sure that we have a lot of hall monitors and that we're hiring subs actually to be in the hall to monitor how many students are in the hallway, where they're going, and making sure they're getting back to their rooms in a timely fashion.
All right, thanks for your feedback on that, Amy. I appreciate that. Resources, these are the last things. Your central hub for all test day information is going to be at this in-school educator experience. It's got links for PSAT and MSQT, PSAT 8-9, and the guides, everything at all you could possibly need is all in this in-school educator experience page. So this is your number one stop. SATsuite.org/educator-experience. This is back to Tom's question about training. So training is required for all test day staff, the test coordinator, proctors, technology monitor. That's a question that I've received quite a bit as well. So the technology, you have an overarching technology person in the district that's helping with devices and bandwidth, but then you also have a technology monitor in the building that's troubleshooting. So that technology monitor will need to have a College Board account. So that might help you make your decision on who's going to be the technology monitor in your school. Do you want it to be a teacher, or do you want someone from your technology department to be that person? They are the person that's troubleshooting on test day, but they do need to have a College Board account, and they will need to see some training. And then the hall room monitors will have training as well. So the proctor topics include the roles and responsibility, how Blue Book works, how Test Day Toolkit works, test devices, the testing room, seating accommodations, and more. Staff should complete that training 1 to 2 weeks ahead of the actual test date. And then there's the timing. For the test coordinator, it takes approximately 60 minutes. For proctors, 30 to 40 minutes. And for the technology hall and room monitors, 20 to 30 minutes. So the link for that is professionaltraining.collegeboard.org. You can find everything you need to know about that at professionaltraining.collegeboard.org. These are the guides that I was referring to. This is a digital registration guide. So if you are at that point where you're doing the upload and you need some guidance on digital registration, there's a specific guide for each test, and you can access all of those at satsuite.collegeboard.org/K-12 educators/educator experience. That's that same site, the first one that I showed you, the educator experience resources. Here's some QR codes that might make it quicker and easier for you. The file specification QR code, the registration QR code, and then the which suite of assessment ordering and registration module. I did put these on earlier, so these are the same ones that I put on earlier in the deck.
So
And
Carrie,
then lastly, okay.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Nope, do this. Then I'll ask. Yep.
Yep, just a reminder that Test Day Toolkit, I get a lot of questions. Where's the access code? Where do I get that? Reminder that you get that through an email, through the link. If you don't get the email for some reason, you can go to testday.collegeboard.org to find that.
So a couple of questions that I'm seeing repeated in different forms. One of them is about accommodations. And let's say they have a parent, whether it's an ELL accommodation or a special ed accommodation, that they would like to have waived. Is there a particular form or something that has to be done for that? And what do our coordinators or our SSD coordinators do for that?
I would recommend that if they have SSD issues at this point that they call SSD customer service, and they can help them, through that process. They can also, they can change the data in the reg file, but for SSD accommodations, I would strongly recommend that they call SSD customer service.
Yeah, especially if they're testing in the next week or so, right? So,
right.
Yeah. So the second one that's in there a bunch, and we knew this was going to happen, and you guys have actually answered a lot of them because a lot of it was on Test Day Toolkit, what to do the day of. And by the way, I saw this a bunch of times, and if you missed the beginning or haven't been a part of these before, we send out a recording to this video to everybody registered. It has in that will be also links embedded for the slide deck and other information. I try to summarize it before we send it out. So any of that information is going to go out in that follow-up, which will probably be early next week as we're already into Friday. Another big question that was out there a couple times was about the speed test issue that we were having last time. So this came up on the technical coordinator one, which was our last webinar, and it was brought up again today. Like, was that glitch fixed? Do we have any answers? And
so I tried to answer as many of those as I could, and I've also sent that question internally up. We've been told that the network bandwidth test has been fixed. So if you're still getting the same results that you got before this week, because it was fixed this week, so I would say probably Wednesday it was supposed to become operational. So if you've tried to test since Wednesday and it's still giving you the same information, I would try clearing your cache for all of your browsers. We've also been told that if you have bandwidth tests that you've done, or if you've done testing with other digital systems and you've been able to test more students than what our bandwidth test is saying, it should be fine. But I know how nervous that test makes people feel. So again, we're escalating the issue and we'll get back to you if we hear anything else. But all we can do right now is recommend that you clear your cache and try the test again.
I did see in the chat that someone put the speed test worked today.
Great.
So that's good.
So one of the other questions from one of my neighbors here in Macomb at Dakota High School was about at an MISD training that was done just the other day by some really wonderful people who I might be partially related to. I want to make sure that that clarification is there. So, and this got upvoted quite a bit, was that they could hold all students until everyone was ready for the break. And then the teacher could, basically start the second half of the test when they're ready. Is that true? Is that inaccurate? I think they're just clarifying to make sure it's consistent with what you're saying. So it's that top Q&A if you're looking in there, right? If you sort them by the most upvotes.
You want to answer that one, Ted?
Well, Carrie, you go ahead. I've been trying to type furiously in the Q&A, so I didn't get that one.
Amy, were you able to do that?
Sorry. Yeah. We
Okay.
we did that with the smaller rooms. We didn't do it with the gym just to see what the difference was going to be. And again, during the pilot, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to do that or not. So because it didn't say I couldn't, I went ahead and tried it.
I think we answered some of the accommodation ones. So one of the questions that got upvoted quite a bit was if students have accommodations listed, but they will not be testing with those accommodations. My understanding from the last 3 webinars and today is if they have accommodations and those are listed, they're testing with accommodations. If you want those accommodations removed, you need to call the SSD office and those need to be removed, and they'll tell you the process you need to do that, approval with parents, etc. That
is correct?
That's
because
correct.
they get those come through electronically. So if they're assigned an SSD, then they're going to have the accommodation.
Right. So, and I might have missed this during the testing. I'm just trying to go through the Q&As that, like I said, were upvoted the most. One of the questions is, does the test automatically resume for students after the break? Or is that something that the proctor has to do in there on the Test Day Toolkit? The question is, what if kids are leaving and breaking at different times? And this might be Ted, Carrie, and Amy. So whomever wants to jump in on that one.
Amy, do you want to jump in with your experience with that?
Yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly, because I wasn't necessarily in the rooms at the time, the break timer will stop and then it'll say to start. And because you're already in there, you'll be able to hit start and go. You won't have to necessarily put in a code again or anything of the sort.
Another question that was in there, and I thought this was pertinent. It didn't get a lot of upvotes, but specifically in our smaller school districts, some of the larger ones too, where a parent might be a coordinator or a proctor, etc. Are there any restrictions or regulations in this testing with the adaptive testing where I can't be that person if my kid is testing? Are there any of those restrictions or regulations?
Yes.
Yeah,
so
I think, yeah, go ahead, Carrie. We just got some.
Yes, I was just going to say the very latest on that, we will be putting something out on that website that the educator experience. Give me 1 second to just look. We just got an email about that today.
And thanks for that question to our friend who asked it, because that was one that as a principal, even in a school had.
If the coordinator or monitor has a family member testing at another school on the same day that they're administering the test, there is not a conflict. If the coordinator monitor has a family member testing at the same school on the same day, there is a conflict. And then if the coordinator monitor has a coordinator or monitor has a family member testing at the same school, but the student is testing on a day they are not administering the test, there is not a conflict. I'm going to send Tom, I'm going to send you a chart that kind of spells that out a little bit more, and you can send that with your follow-up email as well.
Great. And one last piece that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, any of the 3 of you, I'm not the expert here, but I've sat on a bunch of these now as a facilitator. A lot of questions throughout this about hard copy proctor manuals and all of that. And if I'm understanding it right, the Test Day Toolkit becomes the proctor manual and simplifies that process a lot, because now instead of having to flip to page 63, when I'm on that part of the test, on that computer, it's going to show me exactly what I have to read. It's going to have all the appropriate accommodation reading points in there. Everything is hyper simplified versus having the 80-page manual that I have to find page 65 and I have all my little earmarks on there. Is that correct? There will not be exceptions to that. There's not going to be a physical manual. It is the Test Day Toolkit. That's it.
Correct.
That is correct. And we hope, I know this is a lot of information, a lot of new learning, but we hope next year or even this spring, you'll be saying, okay, it went well and it was actually not as much work.
I want to highlight again that one of the reasons, and last June when we did day 1 on this, and I dropped the links of those first 3 days webinars into the chat, and I'll do it again just so you have them because they're all publicly available and you can watch them again. But one of the reasons why we did this, and one of the reasons we encourage so many schools to do this in this fall, particularly for your 8th graders and 11th graders, if no one else, but everybody, is because this is a practice. It's not high stakes. It's not when you're doing this for your state assessment data, and it gets your staff, you and your kids used to the way this is going to work. So I know we're all like amped up to here and should be, right? Because we take this seriously. But one of the reasons that we're doing it now is to figure out what the glitches and the gaffes are, so that when it's for accountability, that we know what we're doing, right? This is very important. I'm not minimizing it, but it is a practice for a reason. In this case, it's not just a practice for your students, but it's a practice for your students, your staff, and you as the coordinator or principal or whatever role you are. And I know, because there, as Carrie just said, there's a ton of new and different on this. And I think at the end of the day, after having a lot of conversations with Amy, who I've known for a long time, and she would be very honest with me and tell me this is awful and it's terrible, her staff and her team found this pretty easy and pretty user-friendly when they did it. And they did it last spring. So they were one of only a handful of schools, which is why we've asked her to be on here. So I hope that at some level, and I know it doesn't, because I'm one of you, and I would be amped up to the nines until I actually did it, right? That this will be a process that will get easier when we do it, and that hopefully once you're in it, it'll be there. That isn't helped by the fact that you don't get access to the TDTK until like a week and a half before or whatever it is. But the nice part is once you're in it, you don't have to do all the study, highlighting, underlining, because it gives you exactly what's there. So I hope that helps kind of maybe bring a little bit of that temperature down as far as the concerns, because there's certainly a lot. And yeah, Joni, you're 100% right? Those juniors taking it for the NMSQT are going to be very concerned, and we want it to go well, right? That wasn't, again, I don't know how else to say it. I'm not minimizing it, but I want to make sure that, we understand that this is a new process. If there are irregularities, like always, the most important thing that you can do is report it when it happens, right? If something goes wrong, no one's usually we don't see big hand slaps when something goes off and we report it. There's a fix. That's why we report it, right? But the nice part about the TDTK, from my understanding of it, from what Amy's told me, and I've learned from Ted and Carrie, is it's very step by step, and it controls for a lot of the issues that might have caused mistakes in the past, right? So if you have that person who, even though you did the whole staff training, was in the back with their knitting needles and wasn't really paying attention to the training, now that's right in front of them. By the way, that was me. Now it's right in front of them on the screen so that they can read it.
And to be very honest, I will tell you, when we did the pilot, for the first half, as soon as I logged in the morning before anyone else, Test Day Toolkit crashed on me. My SSD coordinator could get in, so we could continue with what we needed to do. But we had those issues, and I would say the first 30 minutes, sure, I was running around holding my breath and my heart beating fast. But as soon as those rooms started, it was eerie quiet, and I didn't have to do anything. I watched for irregularities to pop up. I went and helped with the tech person to be able to restart Blue Book or Chromebooks, or get them powered up or log back in. And honestly, we had irregularities. And then if we were doing the actual test and not the pilot, those kids would have been able to retest and do a makeup. And so it felt like the temperature amongst all the proctors and staff administering the test really within 30 minutes went from way up here to way down here. Because then they were like, well, wait a minute, I don't have to read as much. I can see what they're doing. I can look over their shoulders and kind of check out what's happening. And so, yeah, it's very hold your breath in the beginning because you don't know what you're walking into, but it quickly calms down afterwards.
So there is a lot of information that's already online. We will share all of that information out in the email that follows up. I have a list of links from Carrie and Ted that they have they've already done a good job curating, as well as the links to prior webinars, if anybody wants to take those and take a look at. I know we didn't get a chance to answer every question. We're already about 10 minutes over, and I want to be respectful of our panelists and your time. If there are other questions, as always, when you get this, and I've already put this out a couple times, Carrie's always great about send me an email if it's something specific to yours that won't work. So that email's already in the Q&A and was sent out, will be sent out with the follow-up. If there are any larger issues specific to you, like, hey, I've done all these things and it's still not uploading, or hey, we didn't get access to this and we thought we would, they're it. At this point, to highlight what Ted said, if you have questions, about SSD. Because we're about a week and a half out from when that testing window starts, you want to make sure that you're contacting the SSD number like you would have last year or the year prior, right? And make sure those issues are gone through there. With that said, I want to wish you well in the testing. I want to thank our panelists, Ted, Carrie, and of course, Amy, who's taking out of her teaching time right now to be here and answer questions. It's a lot of new. It's going to be a big deal for those kids taking the test. It's a big deal for you as schools because we want to get that accurate information and make sure this goes well. Trust the process. Know that you have supports from the College Board if you need them. And if there are bigger issues or questions that you feel like we need to address in a session, please feel free to email me, tom@massp.com, and we'll work with the SAT task force, with our friends from the College Board, and with other resources that we have to make sure that we're providing those opportunities for you. And of course, once we get into the spring, the state of Michigan will jump into this too. They just are very mum at the beginning because it's not their test, and that makes sense. So we wanted to provide some way for folks to understand the information that was coming to and get it there. So thank you all for being here this morning. Thanks to Ted, Carrie, and Amy for their time. We will do our best to get this out to you early next week. I'm going to try to weed through the questions in the Q&A and make sure some form of that is sent out as well. I hope everybody had a great, and yes, to quote Tracy Stevenson, who very appropriately in the chat just said, have a wonderful weekend and remember to breathe. We're all going to be okay. We're going to get through this. As Amy said, it's going to be high anxiety because we all take our jobs and our work very seriously, but it's going to be okay. So thank you all for being here this morning. Have a great Friday, everyone, and a wonderful weekend. Really, really appreciate your time. Ted, Carrie, Amy, thanks so much.